In this video, I'm going to help you explore how much control past influences have on the decisions you make in life, whether they're positive or negative, and what you can do about it. And do stay till the end of the video where I'll help you to answer the age-old question, should you be here for a good time or a long time? Now, I remember being about 6 years old and my mum took me to see my dad, who owned a car mechanic in Park Royal, which isn't too far from the offices we're in now in Wembley. Now, I can't remember much, but what I do recall is when we got to his place of work, he was behind a desk, there were some suits hanging up, and he was clearly barking orders at some of his employees or his team. And I just had the sense that he was a man of importance within that environment. And that really stuck with me. I couldn't put a word to it, but I did think to myself, that's my dad, and that's something that I would like to experience. Fast forward 12 years, I'm now 17 or 18 years old, sitting in my A-level biology class, and my friend leans over to me and says, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, I had two options when I was 18, and I was either going to be a scientist because my eldest cousin, who I absolutely idolized, he was tall, good looking, he was really good at basketball, he wore Armani jackets, and he was a scientist. My second option was to role model my father, who at this time, I could find the words, was a businessman. So I was either going to be a scientist or I was going to be an entrepreneur. Now, the reason I became an entrepreneur and not a scientist is I actually went on to study applied biology at the University of Greenwich. But when I learned that scientists actually don't make any money, and as a young man, I had ambitions of wealth and prosperity, I thought perhaps that's not for me. And I looked at the other thing that I was really interested in, which was technology, which took me on my entrepreneurial journey. Could say that those influences in my early life weren't bad, and that actually I've made something out of myself as an entrepreneur. However, when I look back at it, even though I had the influence, I didn't have the support, mentorship, or guidance. Essentially, I didn't know what I was doing. And so I believe it's taken me a lot longer than it should have done to get to where I am as an entrepreneur. I'm sure many entrepreneurs feel the same. But looking back at it, if I didn't just have the influence, but I had some insight to go along with that my development and my progress would have accelerated. And that my decision to become an entrepreneur was based on purely the influence of my father, but it wasn't intentional. It's not as if I then went on to business school or I started reading lots of business books or I could find a business mentor. I couldn't do any of those things. And so my journey was more difficult than it had to be. My mother came from Grenada and she became a nurse in the National Health Service here in the UK, and she had a long career in the health service. Now, is it a coincidence that my younger sister, who is a natural health coach, has gone into the health industry? I don't think so. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but what it does say that if myself and my sister were influenced by my mother and my father, that what if my parents did something completely different? Does that mean that we wouldn't be who we are today? And it does beg the question whether or not there were other options for us, and that if influence alone was enough for us to make the best decisions in our own lives. So the question I want you to ask yourself is, who were you influenced by? Was it a parent? Was it a mentor? Was it someone you saw on TV? Was it a book you read? Was it a seminar you went to? And if you're happy with it, cool. But if you're not, then let's reassess that. So let me give you an example. I used to be the business advisor for the South Kilburn Trust. And I remember a woman coming along to one of the advice sessions. She sat down in front of me and she said that she was working in retail. I then asked, well, that sounds great. What is it you'd like some advice on? And she said, you know what, I'm in retail, but it's quite difficult. Not really sure I like working in this kind of environment. And actually, what I've always wanted to do was to start an art school for kids. Now, me running an organization which delivers entrepreneurial education to children, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Why don't you just do that? With the words that I used to her. She then looked at me, the blood drained from her face, and she broke into tears. So I'm now examining whether or not I put on the wrong aftershave, what have I said wrong? And as she composed herself, she looked up and said to me, you're the first person who I've shared that idea with who told me that I should just go ahead and do it. She told me that the influence that she's had when she was growing up, and that the echo chamber that influence has created for her later on in life, has meant that she's parked that idea and she's never really revisited it. And that the decisions that she's made has been based on the influence of people in her network, particularly her family, because she was trying to keep them happy and not keep herself happy. As part of this video, I want to give you permission to do whatever it is you think you should have been doing. Forget about what you're doing right now. Let's just wipe the slate clean and consider, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you really want to do? And I guess, who am I to give you permission? Probably no one, but I bet that I am resonating with that little voice inside you which has been calling for you to do the thing that you're probably really here to do. And now, part of the reason why this woman stuck with her retail career for so long is because of something I've spoken about on past videos, which is the sunk cost fallacy. She spent so much time in the retail sector, she probably felt that if she switched track and started an art school for kids, that all of that investment would be lost. But if it's a bad scenario, it's a bad scenario. And we are familiar with the term throwing good money after bad doesn't give you any more profit. In the same way, throwing good time after bad doesn't ensure that you have future success or even happiness. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with an Ofsted inspector. For those who aren't in the UK, it is the individual who goes around and inspects school and gives them a ranking based on that report. Now, schools live and die by this, and one of the things that the school inspector mentioned to me, based on the work we do teaching entrepreneurship to children, was that enterprise education helps to motivate children intrinsically, whereas traditional education motivates you extrinsically, meaning you are motivated by getting a good grade as opposed to being motivated by doing something that you really want to do because it's something that you have decided for yourself. So when we're talking about past influence, you've got to think to yourself, are you influenced extrinsically or intrinsically? Are you motivated or influenced? Are you influenced by the things that really drive you and the things that you wake up and dream about? Or are you influenced by external factors only? Chances are, in the real world, we are influenced by both. There are some external factors we have to adhere to, paying bills and all the rest of it. But then there are intrinsic motivators, which we also have to adhere to, which are around happiness, motivation, and our dreams. But the good news is, if you get this bit right and you can qualify how you are being influenced and whether or not that influence is positive or negative, now if you take the advice in this video, whether you decide to be an entrepreneur or a 9-to-5er, then you don't have to choose whether or not you should be here for a good time or a long time. You can absolutely do both. And that's because you are now in control of the things that influence you. So whether that's past influence or present influence, and probably a mixture of both, if you have a better control or understanding of those things, then your chances of success and happiness for the future are much, much greater. That's it for today's video, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Ultra and out.